Well, I'll just do a quick introduction. I'm Amelia. I work for the American Alpine Club, and I'm running a program called Send It to the Polls this year, where the AAC is encouraging climbers to get their partners out to vote, get themselves out to vote, and really to hold each other accountable this election season. We think the accountability piece is huge. So many people will register and then totally just drop the ball when it comes to actually getting to the polls in November or submitting a ballot beforehand. And so we think holding each other accountable is the big key piece this year. So that is kind of what we're doing with the Send It to the Polls program. And I'm delighted to invite someone who doesn't need an introduction, Chris Schulte, to do his own introduction from his van in Santa Cruz.
Hey, good morning, Amelia. Well, thanks very much for hosting. Really appreciate it. And thanks for reaching out. My name's Chris. I've been climbing for just about 25 years. I was born in Texas, and like a few of them, I moved out to Colorado and started climbing out there. And I lived in Colorado for, about 25 years. And I've just actually moved out to California. Been out here for, I guess actually I moved out here technically in, I suppose it was January. And no, I guess it was February. And then pretty much immediately went on a climbing trip to Europe. And my 4-week trip turned into like 4.5 months due to COVID, everybody's favorite expression of 2020. We ended up getting stuck over there for a while, which I won't say it was bad. I'll say it was kind of best life scenario. Actually, it was really nice. You could like go and buy toilet paper. There was there were no like canned food shortages or anything. You could still go climbing. Actually, just getting back to the States. Been back about a little bit over a month now, and today I'm in Santa Cruz, just off the beach. I'm out here working for the next few days, week or so, between Santa Cruz and Tahoe, and hopefully get to visit Yosemite here pretty soon, now that the smoke has kind of died down and the park is opened back up, because of course, wildfires out here have been pretty nuts, but things are shaping up. It's kind of a clear and a nice day today.
Good. I'm so glad to hear the fires have been so terrible all summer. And I know a lot of people are really struggling with the smoke and whatnot. So I'm glad to hear that it's getting better and you can be outside safely and experience the beach and see past, 10 feet in front of you. That's good.
We were actually in Yosemite when the first really bad bits of smoke started rolling in, and it was like this big like red brown wall that kind of came in, and it was like sky turned orange. It's it's raining ash, and we got out of there, and just a while back they shut down the whole park because the air quality from there all the way to Bishop was just off the chart. So
well, that feels like a good transition into our discussion about voting. I think that among with many other things that have been happening this summer are really showing people the importance of decision makers and what they have control over, and how decisions from our government really do impact our lives. So Chris, I was wondering, do you remember the first time you ever voted?
Wow. I do, because it sort of fell right around when I turned 18. So it was kind of like one of those things where like, okay, cool. Well, first of all, I had to register for the draft, and I was like, this is kind of lame. What do I get out of this exactly. Oh yeah, okay, let's see. I can buy cigarettes or a shotgun or a rifle, or I can vote, and so so yeah, I went and cast my ballot for the first time. It was it must have been like 96, which was kind of like it was a weird race at the time. It was like it was Clinton and Dole and H. Ross Perot, and I remember it being like kind of wacky, and it was my first time, so I really wanted to do everything right, and here you are, like ready to exercise your right as an American, your duty, So I did a bunch of research, and I'm listening to everybody's particular platforms, and having grown up in Texas, Ross Perot was pretty familiar, I mean, everybody knew about him. And I remember being interested in his platform because it was sort of the first time that I actually paid attention and saw somebody that wasn't running either Democratic or Republican. I don't remember what exactly he called himself. I don't know, but basically he was sort of like a third party candidate. And that by itself was kind of cool. I was like, wow, here's like this is just like my civics class, my my American history class said it worked. Anybody could run for president, and it can work. So I remember doing research, and then things got all kinds of weird. He got all emotional and like dropped out of the race, all disgusted, and then jumped back in, and everyone was like, "No, you joker." But that's kind of what I remember the most was this guy's antics, and I'm pretty sure. What's funny is I can't remember who I voted for. I'm pretty sure it was Clinton though, and yeah, it was interesting because I, I'd have to chew on my perspective on it a little bit longer, honestly, to think about how I felt about it beyond. Well, let's just take the evidence and the platforms that we have and choose the best candidate for me, and that's sort of what it felt like. It was sort of like a math equation or just something you did, or this is part of my job as American citizen.
Right. Do you think your 18-year-old self was considering all of the other candidates who were running down the ballot, or were you really focused on the general? Because that's kind of what's sexy and what's, all over the news.
it's that's a great question, and we're just going to keep facing that, I think, as Americans, because I mean, we are a two-party system. We have the possibility for this endless list of candidates. Almost anybody can run for president as long as you meet the criteria. Um, but yeah, I mean, it usually comes down to the old red and blue, doesn't it? Um, I didn't really think much about it then. Um, Something I do think about now, and I gotta admit it's a little bit frustrating, is there is so much weight put behind fundraising for campaigns, and you wonder, like, why is it so important that your media controls or helps decide how viable of a candidate you are? That's kind of frustrating. um, there's not a lot of countries in the world that allow that. So I'm kind of bummed that that's what we do. Um, my 18-year-old self, looking at the mix, I guess I had a little bit of a grasp of like what was gonna matter in the end. Like I could have voted for, I don't know, anybody. I could have voted for Macaulay Culkin if I wanted. I don't know. But there's a point where you have to realize, like, if we're going to do this whole red versus blue two-party system thing, the best you can do is pick the candidate that aligns closest to your values, and you just got to be ready to lean on them from there, you know, and hold them accountable.
I think that's a great point. And, you know, something I'm hearing a lot is people are disappointed with both candidates who are available to us. But really, I heard a quote once, and I think it's really stuck with me, especially through this election, where you don't have to pick your candidate who you're going to vote for president like you're picking a spouse. It's not something that's forever. No one is
Yep.
ever going to be perfect. And it's really a harm reduction process. You're picking the person who you think aligns best with your values. And even if neither of them are perfectly aligned with your values, because whoever will be, you're going to pick the person who you think will do the least harm for our country. And I think that that's something that's really stuck with me this election, while we are still playing this two-party system game. I'm just harm reduction voting, which is great. You know, it's one piece of my advocacy toolbox. I'll cast a ballot and then I'll move on and keep doing advocacy in other ways. So I think that's, you know, a really great anecdote, because yeah, if we have to play within the system, I think it's good to remember that it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yep. Yep. It really simplifies things right now, I think. You know, and it's something that I mean, as Americans, we're such part of our national culture is this idea of personal freedom. You know, we've cast ourselves as individualists. It's part of our social consciousness. It's part of our identity. So, you know, we have the right to do whatever, you know, this is what we do, you know, personal freedom, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it just kind of goes off the rails, you know, like there's a measure of like, let's call it civic, or let's call it social responsibility that you probably have to observe. I like the spouse analogy. I've been a fan of the bus stop analogy lately too. Like, you know, you take the bus that gets you closest, you know, if the bus doesn't go exactly where you're going, you're not like, whatever bus, I'm not going, you know. Well, you know, it's a long walk without the bus, you know, or else you just don't go anywhere. So yeah you do your best, you get as close as you can, and then also from therein there's all of these other levels that you need to participate in, apart from just voting in the presidential election, which is another thing that we do. Like, we want also, as Americans, we really want the quick and easy, bam, took care of that solution, you know. And you can't just show up every 4 years and just vote in the presidential election and be like, all right, took care of that, it's in their hands now. It doesn't exactly work that way. It doesn't even come close to working that way, as a matter of fact. You know, there's, and this is a little bit frustrating too. There's all of these levels that we have to participate in politics. You know, you have to pay attention to senates and judges and your state's government, and I mean, to be honest, school board, you know, all the way down.
Yeah.
And they don't really make it easy on us either, you know. Like, there are all these things that we have to pay attention to. We have to figure out, you know, how does this directly relate to my life? Or, you know, well, I don't have kids, so why do I need to worry about the school board? Well, you know, if your school is losing funding, or whatever school is losing funding, that just means we're just not keeping up. We're not cranking out smart voters for the future, you know. Like, that's the thing I usually think about.
Totally.
So yeah, it's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, and it's funny you touch on that, because Sarah in the comments said there's so many more candidates than president. We can vote for local, county, state officials too. And that's so true. I think it's, you know, almost I wouldn't say it's more important because obviously it's extremely important to vote in the general election, but it's directly impacting your life living in your neighborhoods and, you know, your neighbors' lives. And I think that is just so critical to remember that, like, it may be harder to find the information about who your county commissioner race folks are, but it's almost more important sometimes because that they're using your dollars and putting them into your community, and you get to decide where they put them. So I think
Right.
that's a really good point.
I mean, when was the last time you went to and voted for a sheriff? You know, like,
Yeah.
and there's all these things. You know, got treasurer. You know, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. I wish we had like a voting app.
Yeah.
You know, I think we can all agree on that. If we could vote for everything via text, that
Mhm.
would be awesome. Oh, and also if we didn't have to like fact check all the time.
Yeah.
You know.
I
Um,
think it's been a huge part of this season has been utilizing tools to read an article and then read another article and then look that article up in Snopes and see if there's any truth to the matter. It's been an interesting one with the media.
Fact checking the fact checkers is one of the slowest, most time consuming things. Like you're just sitting there like, all right, I've gone back 3 steps now, you know, to find out if the source of the source is, you know, legitimate. Yeah, it's exhausting, you know, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you know, in some cases they don't really want to make it easy on you, you know. But yeah, like we were saying, we're kind of, I feel like I'm voting for damage control right now. Absolutely. So yeah, let's refer back to that civic duty thing. It's not just your right. Like it's, it's kind of your duty to each other, to the freaking planet, you know, like, to the rest of the world, you know, like, being over in, I was mostly in Switzerland and a little bit in France when I was over there through the spring and then the early summer, and it was it was interesting. It was interesting, you know, meeting with people. One, during pandemic time. Two, because all the borders were closed, you know, everywhere. So being in a small country like Switzerland, which has a smaller population than like LA County, um, you know, when someone would meet my girlfriend and I, they're like, what are you doing here? How are you here? You know, like, cause you can't get out, you can't get into Switzerland. You can't get into France. Everywhere's closed. So chatting with these folks, you know, it was really interesting. They all wanted to know what's going on over there, you know, like the world looks to y'all. The world looks to America, you know. You've got great music and you have this vision of freedom and you crank out all the good movies, like we're important and the whole world looks at us, you know. So yeah, it's not just about us. In a lot of ways, we try to set a standard, an ethic for the world, which, you know, can be funny sometimes because we're funny. um, but yeah, a lot of people look our way. You know, we try to set the good bar. You know, I grew up. I grew up in the 80s. I was totally like Cold War kid. When I was going to elementary school and whatnot, uh, Cold War was a thing. Berlin Wall was up when I was little. You know, we did the whole, you know, the Soviet Union is bad because they're not as free as us. You know, and I remember like nuclear drills hiding under the desk, being like, "This is obviously stupid." Um, but what was always pushed when we were kids was like, look, our science is great, our music is great, our culture is great because we have this freedom, we have this vision of like of how the world can be, you know, and it was mostly based on our art, you know, like it was amazing that we had like rock and roll, punk rock, you know, like David Bowie and Prince, and like it, we were special in that way, you know, and a lot of people looked to us for those reasons, you know. We were leaders in science, so on and so forth, and we maintain that responsibility. We have such a big effect on the entire planet, ecologically, sociologically. Yeah, it's a responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that also makes me think about all of the Americans or folks who live in this country who aren't able to vote. There's a lot of voter disenfranchisement happening in this country, and I think it's also good to remember that, you know, me as like a college educated white person living in Salt Lake City who has mail-in ballot access and can, you know, sit with my ballot for a week and do all my research from home and then mail it to the county. Like, I think that's such a privilege. And I want to use that to vote for all of the folks in my neighborhoods who can't. And so it's good to remember that not only are we, you know, one of the countries in the world who are allowed to vote for our leadership, but there's so many people who live here who can't. So I think it's like even more important as folks with privilege to be able to cast that ballot for others who can't.
It is, especially this year, we're looking at so many instances um, of how difficult it's being made to vote, you know. What with the post office issues, and you know, there's some states that they're just making it impossible for huge swaths of people. For a long time, people couldn't vote who had been convicted of a felony or whatever, no matter like how uh, of what nature it was, and so on. Me myself in that line, I remember being particularly frustrated because way back in the day, I actually got grabbed for growing grass before it was cool, you know. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you know, legal in I don't know how many states. At the time, it was not. And I remember being so frustrated finding out that I couldn't vote to change the law that got me in trouble.
Mm.
Um, that was really weird, especially now. Here we are, 20 years later, and it's a completely different world, you know. Um, which is another thing. Like, talk about making a difference through your lower level government vote. Like, marijuana got legalized, you know. Like, I don't know how many years ago, if you would have told me that, like, I wouldn't have believed it. But the people got together, the people voted, and now everything's different, you know. So it can work, you know. Huge changes, huge changes.
And that's a big testament for, you know, propositions that are happening in your local ballots. So definitely encouraging people to do research on those ballot initiatives. They range so much. It can be like anything from legalizing medical marijuana to, you know, changes in the school board to, you know, it could be anything. So I think it's important to do research on that end as well. Can you tell us a story about a challenging time that you had voting, or quote unquote your biggest voting epic of your life?
Um, well, the biggest thing was probably not being able to vote. That was a big deal because I thought that was just like for life. Like, I had the Les Miserables, Jean Valjean yellow ticket, and then just from from then on, I'm like a marked man, you know. Like, that was pretty frustrating. But I will say I had a really awkward experience this last election. Um, first of all, I was like, wow, this is what we're doing. This is our two-party ticket right now. This is who we're choosing between. Okay, well, all right. I guess, I'm voting for damage control already, And so I roll in, I'm voting in person. I had just moved from Boulder to Durango, Colorado, one part of Colorado to another. And so I go in to vote in person, and the person who was, handing out your ballot or whatever, telling you what kind of ballot you need and so on and so forth. I said, hey, I'm just down here, just come back down here, change of address recently, one part of Colorado to another. And she tells me, oh, well, actually, you need one of these ballots. And with this change of address, I don't know if, you were supposed to do this weeks ago. I don't even know if it's going to get counted, and I'm kind of like, wait, hang on, what now? This is kind of a surprise. And thankfully there was, like an election monitor, this woman was standing over in the corner, a volunteer from Fort Lewis College, and she says, hold it right there, that's not right. You give him this ballot. I'm on the phone right now with the regional director or whatever, and yeah, this guy's good to go. Make sure, and it was such an awkward thing because there was an actual moment where I felt personally kind of judged, pigeonholed, whatever. I rolled in, and this person who was handing out the ballots immediately decided who I was going to vote for, what I was going to do, and they decided to try and make it difficult. That was really awkward. That was really frustrating. And you know, uh, we're probably going to see things like that in this election too. Unfortunately. Um, I'll be voting in person this time again, just to make sure.
And I think it's interesting because, you mentioned you just moved from one part of Colorado to another part of Colorado. And really, like, that should be a super easy fix. You're not even moving state to state, but each county is so different. Each state is obviously so different in whether or not you can register same day, whether or not you have to, go through your county clerk's office directly to register. There's so many technicalities involved, which seems really unnecessary sometimes.
Oh, totally. What is it? It was like one of the East Coast states I thought was like, okay, if you're mailing in your ballot, make sure you put the privacy sleeve on the envelope. And you're like, so you're actually going to throw away my ballot, my vote, if I don't put the extra sleeve over my envelope.
Right.
Like, it's a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's important that we vote so we can maybe like lessen the number of hoops as well.
Right. And it's so important to do your research before you're registering and double checking, triple checking your voter registration status. You can typically do that online through your county clerk's office or your state elections office website. And I think it's just so critical, especially as climbers. We're super transient. We move around a lot, whether it's state to state or county to county. And you have to have an updated address. I've been registering folks to vote in climbing gyms, and a bunch of other AAC volunteers have as well. And we've noticed the biggest thing we catch is people who have not updated their address. So encouraging people to do that research about what is required in their state, because some states do allow same-day registration and you can vote in person, and some states don't. So it's really important to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've changed my address a number of times over the last like 1 year even.
Right.
And you go through your like car insurance or something, and it's still going to a place you lived like 2 years ago or whatever. That's the kind of thing that can trip you up. Something that I've been really digging, that I've seen go around social media, is people sharing their voting plan. Which is I mean, it's really easy. We often, as Americans, take our right slash duty to vote for granted. So you think to yourself like, oh yeah, I'm gonna vote. I'm just gonna go vote, and it can happen pretty quickly where all of a sudden it's election day and you're like, oh, actually I'm working, or I'm in Indian Creek, or whatever, whatever, But when you kind of like sit down and you think about it and you vocalize it and you make this plan, it's a whole lot easier to stick to, and also it helps you check all those boxes, like, is all my paperwork up to date, am I even registered?
Yeah, and I think I saw a statistic where it's like you're 30% more likely to actually vote if you have a plan.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good to, Sarah put a really great comment, and this is a good transition actually, about there's so much we can be doing to not only vote ourselves, but to make sure all of our friends are voting, our families voting, and like people in other states are voting. She wrote that there are ways that you can affect races even outside of your home state through text banking, phone banking, letter writing. There's a bunch of resources you can find. She suggested looking into voteforward.org and hopping on a letter writing campaign. There's just so much you can do. And I think, as you were saying, there's so many barriers that are, bubbling to the top this election season. And if we can have an impact on other people's voting experience, I think that's huge. So volunteering this year is super critical. And yeah, I mean, as climbers, we're great at making plans. They don't always work as we plan, but like you say, we're gonna meet in the parking lot at 2 a.m. We're gonna start hiking by 2:30. Even if weather comes in, we have a backup plan, and I think, we can make a voting plan. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, and an edit from Sarah. It's Vote Forward, abbreviated. So it's VOTEFWD.org. So check that out if you're looking to get more involved in the election this year.
Making a note of it.
Oh, and Sam said, I'm taking a 4-week climbing trip in the next few weeks, and I'm cutting it short to drive back across the country to vote in person. See, I mean, Sam was already making a plan, and that sounds like a good one because I feel similarly. I'm in Utah, where we have been doing mail-in ballots for about 12 years now, and because of the recent, political stance on mail-in ballots, I'm just going to drop mine in a drop box rather than put it in the mail. So I think it's critical, if your state, so California, for example, is doing mail-in this year due to COVID. But there are definitely drop boxes around the state. So if you don't feel super great about mailing in your ballot this year, be sure to look for where your local drop box is, or see where your precinct is and vote in person. So I think Samuel Murphy's idea about, cutting the trip short to vote in person is big.
Absolutely.
Well, we touched on this a little bit already, Chris, but I just would love to hear, what you would say to someone in response to this. I think a question I've gotten a lot from people, from volunteers who are registering people to vote. So we've been doing this at just climbing gyms or crags across the country, just asking different people like, hey, is your registration up to date? Is your address up to date? And we've had people, react really negatively and just say, yeah, I'm not voting this year. It's not worth it. Like, my vote doesn't count anyway. I live in a state that's going to vote red no matter what due to the electoral college, or I live in a state that's going to vote blue no matter what. So like, what is the point? Why is it important? How would you, Chris Schulte, respond to someone saying that?
That's an awesome question, because I've been that person that was like, it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count. Either because of where I live, or at the time I was like 20 something, and was like, it's all a big conspiracy, it's not real. Yeah, I've been there, for a huge list of reasons. Basically the first thing I would say, the Electoral College decided our last president. Popular vote, not so much. For me personally, I think we need to vote like crazy and see what the Electoral College does, no matter what. The voice of the citizenry of America is what matters most. It's what they're always telling us. So that's where we have to put our trust in, you know. We vote, we get the numbers, then we see what the Electoral College does. Then we act accordingly from there, you know. Then we have to actually maybe analyze, like, okay, what's the function of this? Is it still practical? Is it representing America and Americans, you know? The last election, something like 40 something percent of America didn't vote, like almost half. That's mind blowing, you know? I mean, it's like you and I were talking about voting for damage control. And I think it's, you know, we don't have to split hairs too much to say that things are kind of a mess right now, you know? We're dealing with the fallout. But almost half of America didn't show up to the most important test that we had to take, you know? A friend of mine used to say, like, well, you know what, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of us have a lot to complain about, you know, and honestly, sure, you can complain all you want whether you vote or not, but what did you do about it, you know? Again, it's a right, it's a privilege, and it's also kind of a responsibility that you have. Show up for your friends. You don't have to show up for yourself, but like, think about family members, think about your best friends, think about the areas that we go climbing, public lands. Think about health and safety. Yeah, think about the world. Yeah, that's about how I would respond, I guess.
No, I
I
think
haven't I haven't met almost everyone I know is voting, so I don't know. You know, every now and again I'll get a message on Instagram or something, you know, which is just, as you know, a disaster. And it'll be like, oh, you know, man, like I don't believe in any of it. It's all a setup. And I kind of, those people I try to give particular attention to and be like, look, why don't you try it out? You know, why don't you throw your vote in and we'll see what the numbers say, and then you can make a decision. Just make your decision after this election, you know?
right. There's so much at stake, and I feel I try to think back to how I was feeling around this time in 2016, and I don't think I felt quite such an intense sense of urgency that I do now. And there's so many issues that 2020 has made very apparent that exist. And there's so much, you know, inequity going on in this country, and there's so much suppression of votes going on in this country. And I think it's just so critical, as you said, to vote not just for your friends and your family and for the climbing community, but like your unsheltered neighbors and, you know, friends in the LGBTQ plus community and friends whose voices are often silenced, or people who cannot vote. Like you mentioned with your personal story, hearing that you couldn't vote was a terrible reality for you. And there's so many people in this country who can't. And when I see those numbers of like 100 million Americans did not vote last year, I can't even wrap my head around that. I think Sam put a really good quote into the chat that says, the conspiracy around this is to breed ambivalence into the populace. We have to care no matter what. I think that's a great point. And
Totally. I mean, ambivalence. Yeah. Like, yeah, if there's any big secret ulterior motive between us and them, it's like the big scary they, whoever they are. Why on earth would they want you to vote? So you really want to stick it to the man, so to speak. Like, just freaking vote, man. Like, try it out. You might like it. It might make a difference.
totally. I know we have 10 or so minutes left, and so I wanted to see if anyone has questions. This is like a small group discussion, and I would love to hear what other people have to say. So if you want to turn your mics on or your cameras on and want to share something about your process through this election season, please let us know. I just wanted to highlight something Sarah touched on earlier, but I think it's really critical this year. If you have the capacity to volunteer, you should do it. There's a national poll shortage for poll workers due to COVID-19. Many folks who work at the polls are, over 50, retired, and many of them can't do that this year due to the threat of COVID. So I know locally here in Salt Lake, I signed up to be a poll worker. It does take your full day on the election day, so I had to request work off for that. But if you have the means to do something like that, you should totally take advantage and volunteer in your local community. There's a website called powerthepolls.com, and you can sign up to kind of get looped into how to start that process in your community. So that's one step. And then I think looking back at Sarah's comment, there's so many different things that you can phone bank for. And if you don't like talking on the phone and get crippling anxiety like me, I hate talking on the phone and cold calling people. There's also text banking apps that you can utilize. And I think it's good to think outside of your state. There's, some critical states where there's races happening, and you can text bank for those if you feel so inclined. Or you can look at your local elections that are happening. And if there's a candidate who you're really excited about, email their campaign and see if they need some help. It's crunch time right now. October hits and it's just it's a sprint to the finish line. And there's always help needed. So I think definitely reach out for that. And then Sarah Wolf asked a question: what are all the things AAC is doing around this effort? You mentioned going to the gyms, etc. So the first step of this effort was just pushing out in the digital space, as many other orgs are doing, our commit to vote feature that automatically then takes you to our voter registration feature. The reason we're doing a commit to vote is because people are 30% more likely to vote if they make a plan and then are reminded 2 weeks beforehand. So our second step or phase of this campaign is going to be to phone bank, my favorite task, all of the people who committed to vote with the AAC from all across the country. So it's cool, we'll be able to talk to people in Michigan or in Utah or in California and just make sure they have a plan and have all the questions answered that they need before making it to the polls this year, whether it's mailing it in, requesting absentee, or showing up in person. So if anyone's interested in volunteering for those efforts, you can email me. I can write my email in the chat, but it's ahowe, Howe, at americanalpine.org. Chris, are there any exciting volunteer opportunities that you're looking forward to taking part in leading up to the election?
So obviously the election is a huge discussion topic. Seems like more so than ever. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or if it's just seems like such a dire situation right now to me, or a combination therein. But something that I have been encouraging people to do is the one-on-one stuff. Have the conversation in your family. I mean, I love the I love the story of the kind of crappy uncle or whatever at Thanksgiving who like has a couple drinks and says something stupid, and you're like, oh my God, and then everybody's just like, don't even start. you know, it's time to start.
Yeah.
It's time to like have those conversations. Um, you think it's hard to like convince a stranger of your point of view. Your circle is the best place to start. Yeah, everybody's worn out, everybody's tired, everybody's like, I mean, some of us have been like locked up for months. Life is not normal right now. It's either, you've got a mask on because of COVID or because of the smoke in the air, or things are nuts, everybody's tired. So whenever, drunkle Chad or whatever starts saying something stupid, you definitely feel like you don't want to deal with it. Now is the time to like have those conversations and be like, look, bud, here's why this is important. Here's what's important to me. What's important to you? What's funny to me is every level of politics is like this. Last year, which seems like a million years ago, last fall, I went with the Access Fund and the American Alpine Club to DC for Climb the Hill. And yeah, you were there. And for me, that was such an eye-opener because I had no idea how politics actually worked. I thought it was this, big sterile mechanism, and you just, if you wanted one thing and, the other side didn't want that one thing, you just sort of didn't really talk about it. That's not at all how it works. You go into these meetings knowing that, maybe this particular senator or whomever isn't on your side. But then you talk with them and you say, well, look, here's what we're looking for. Here's what's important to us. And here's why, and then you find out, here you are advocating for public lands because you want to go climbing. Well, maybe you find out that they're into fishing or whatever. Oh, holy cats. Then you find out that their district is right next to you, and maybe you've actually fished in the same stream. This actually happened to me. And, all of a sudden you're I never get to say you're reaching across the aisle, and you're having an actual conversation with someone. Those kind of conversations. And this is me, this climber dude, and a senator, it was really cool. But this can also be you and your cousin who you never see except at holidays or whatever. This can be you and your parents, your grandparents. That's a great place to start, small circle conversations in your family, in your circle of friends. That's where change happens. That's where you actually have the opportunity to take the time, to buckle down and try to find common ground. That's as real as it gets, is face to face right there, friends and family. That's where it's at. That makes the most impact.
Yeah, I think the sphere of influence is huge. Have those hard conversations. I know we're all exhausted, but like they work sometimes. And at least if they don't work, you're gaining empathy towards others. You're like listening to people and gaining, an understanding for where people are coming from. I think we've lost some of that, and it's good to hold on to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for sharing coffee with me this morning and talking about these things. I think it was great just to hear your perspective, and I hope that people learn something and we can take all this energy and passion and take it to the polls and get those 100 million non-voters from last year to show up too.
That'd be amazing. How cool would it be if like we set a record for turnout this year? That'd
be so awesome.
That'd be pretty great.
In states like Montana and Wyoming and Utah, and where a lot of climbers are, I think that would be huge. That'd be huge. let's get those rural climbing states out to vote.
Fingers crossed.
Do it. Awesome, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, and I really appreciate your time, Chris. I know it was early for you, so thanks for, chugging some coffee and having some good conversation. This was awesome.
I saw a beautiful sunrise right here. It was really good. Thanks so much for hosting.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'll hopefully talk to you guys soon. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this November.
Yeah,
you guys are doing. Yeah, you guys are doing a lot of work, a lot of good work, and I applaud you for everything. So.
Well, thanks for having us, Coast Valley Fest. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day. Have a good Sunday.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good luck. Good weather to y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.